The date was June 6, 2015. Inside the Clinton Correctional Facility, something was terribly wrong. Two convicted murderers were not in their cells. They had vanished. The initial discovery must have sent a jolt of pure shock through the prison staff. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not with men like these. One of the missing men was Richard Matt, a career criminal serving 25 years to life for a brutal crime. In 1997, he had kidnapped, tortured, and murdered his former boss. Matt was known for his manipulative charm and history of escapes. The other escapee was David Sweat. He was serving a life sentence for the murder of a sheriff's deputy in 2002. Together, they formed a formidable pair. These were not petty thieves. They were killers. They had taken lives, and yet, they had managed to escape. From a place nicknamed Little Siberia for its remote location and harsh winters, a place designed to be escape-proof. The news spread like wildfire. Fear gripped the small town of Dannemora. It quickly spread across the state, then the nation. Two murderers were out. The hunt was on. The escape was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a masterpiece of patience and cunning. Richard Matt and David Sweat had spent months meticulously planning their exit. They had studied the prison's aging infrastructure. They had found its weaknesses. They had learned the routines of the guards. They had noted the blind spots. They needed tools to cut through steel and concrete. And somehow, they got them. Hacksaw blades, drill bits, chisels. Night after night, they worked. They cut holes in the back of their steel cell walls. They squeezed into the narrow utility corridors behind. They navigated a treacherous maze of pipes and catwalks. One of the most bizarre details was their use of bacon fat to grease the threads of the large steam pipes they had to cut into. Imagine the scene. The darkness. The cramped spaces, the stench of rust and decay. They squeezed through spaces barely wide enough for a human body. They crawled, they climbed, they were driven by a desperate desire for freedom. From their cells they descended into the bowels of the prison. They navigated a labyrinth of tunnels. Finally they emerged outside the prison walls, through a manhole on a street in Dannemora. An escape this elaborate often requires help, and Matt and Sweat had it. From an unlikely source. Joyce Mitchell. She was a 51-year-old civilian employee at the prison. She worked as an instructor in the prison's tailor shop. She supervised inmates, including Richard Matt and David Sweat. She was married. But beneath the surface, a dangerous relationship was forming. She became entangled with the two convicts, particularly with Matt. He charmed her. He manipulated her. Mitchell became their accomplice. She smuggled tools to them. Hacksaw blades, drill bits. She hid them in frozen hamburger meat. She brought them into the prison. She provided them with other contraband. She was a vital cog in their escape machine. Her involvement was supposed to go even further. She had agreed to be their getaway driver. She was to pick them up after they emerged from the manhole. She was to drive them to a remote location. But at the last moment, Joyce Mitchell faltered. On the night of the escape, she didn't show up. She reportedly suffered a panic attack. Her failure to appear left Matt and Sweat stranded. It changed the course of their escape. When the sun rose on June 6th, the reality set in. Two killers were loose. The largest manhunt in New York State history began, lasting 22 agonizing days. Over 1,300 law enforcement officers were involved. They swarmed the dense forests and remote terrain of upstate New York. The area around Dannemora became an armed camp. Roadblocks were set up, vehicles were searched, and residents were warned to stay vigilant. Fear was a constant companion. The search was relentless. Helicopters chopped through the air, drones with thermal imaging cameras scanned the landscape, and canine units tracked scents through the wilderness. Officers on foot, heavily armed, combed through dense woods, swamps, and abandoned buildings. The terrain was their enemy. It was vast, rugged, and provided endless hiding places. The escapees were believed to be armed and extremely dangerous. The tension was palpable. Every rustle of leaves, every shadow could be them. For the people living in the search area, it was a terrifying ordeal. Their peaceful communities were transformed into a war zone. They lived on edge, schools were closed, outdoor activities were curtailed, and the constant presence of armed officers was both reassuring and unsettling. The media descended on the region. The story captivated the nation. The audacity of the escape, the drama of the manhunt. It was a real-life thriller playing out on the nightly news, but for those in its midst, it was no game. It was a matter of life and death. Their time was running out. The manhunt reached its bloody climax in late June. On June 26, 2015, Richard Matt's luck ran out. He was spotted near Malone, New York, not far from the Canadian border. He had broken into another cabin and was armed with a 20-gauge shotgun. When confronted by a U.S. Border Patrol tactical team, he refused to surrender. Shots were fired. Richard Matt was shot and killed. His 3 weeks of freedom were over. He died in the woods, a desperate fugitive. 2 days later, on June 28, David Sweat was cornered. He was found just a couple of miles from the Canadian border near the town of Constable. A New York State police sergeant spotted him walking along a road. Sergeant J. Cook pursued him. Sweat tried to flee into a field. Sergeant Cook opened fire, hitting Sweat twice in the torso. He was wounded but alive. He was taken into custody. His desperate bid for freedom was over. He was captured, alone, his partner dead, his dream of escape shattered. He would return to a prison cell, this time under even tighter security. The escape sent shockwaves through the New York prison system. Investigations were launched, security protocols were reviewed, and staff members were scrutinized. Joyce Mitchell was arrested. She pleaded guilty to promoting prison contraband and criminal facilitation. She was sentenced to prison. The Great Escape from Clinton Correctional Facility became a cautionary tale. The echoes of those missing inmates, and the hunt to find them,